Tonight on KQED Newsroom, California is set to shape the new administration through its leadership and ideas. We'll discuss California's place in the Biden years. Also, wine country restaurants sue Governor Gavin Newsom over outdoor dining. One of the lead plaintiffs tells us why he feels the ban is unfair. Plus, the latest on coronavirus case numbers and vaccine distribution here in the Golden State. Welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Priya David Clemens. The presidential inauguration this week ushered in a new administration to the White House. President Donald J. Trump Jr. exited one of the most tumultuous presidencies in U.S. history, and the nation's 46th president, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., stepped into office. He's accompanied by California native Vice President Kamala Harris, the first woman to hold this office and the first Black and Asian American in this position. The two have launched into the first 100 days of the new administration with vigor, rescinding dozens of Trump-era decisions related to immigration, the environment, and the pandemic. They're also building a cabinet that includes several California heavy hitters. Joining us now by Skype from Oakland is Politico's senior writer Carla Marinucci, and KQED senior editor of Politics and Government Scott Shafer joins us from San Francisco. Hello to you both. Thank you for joining me in what is one of the busiest weeks in a political journalist's life, the inauguration week. Carla, did you report from here in California, or did you travel back to D.C. like usual?
Usually we would be right there watching in person. This year the pandemic has changed it up. We were here in Oakland doing it from afar, and it was an interesting event to do it this way.
So what was it that struck you as most interesting this week?
You know, I think watching Kamala Harris, a woman who was born in Oakland, raised on the streets of Berkeley, who honed her political skills in the San Francisco Hall of Justice, who came up and became the top cop in California. Watching her raise her hand with her husband next to her, Doug Emhoff, the first gentleman, the first gentleman. I mean, all of these things were moments where I think women have waited for these moments for decades, for generations. Women of color have waited for these moments. And I think there it was, the evidence that we had turned a page in American politics. We were seeing a new generation, a new moment, and a moment in which I think California is going to take its place in the White House in a very big and different way.
It was absolutely a significant time. And Scott, you've seen many inaugurations. What stayed with you this week?
Well, certainly Kamala Harris. I mean, we're kind of spoiled here in San Francisco. We've had the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, representing us, and now we also have the Vice President, although she lives in L.A. So that certainly was incredible to see. You know, I was in D.C. 4 years ago, and I remember, first of all, it started raining as soon as Donald Trump started speaking. I remember that. And the tone of his speech was so negative and dystopian. He talked about American carnage. And this speech was just so different in every way, in terms of the entertainment, in terms of the tone. And I think it was just like a weight being lifted from the country in a way, you know, the sense that we now have a president who is at least going to try to bring us together. It's easier said than done, of course. So, but that really struck me. And then, of course, the 22-year-old poet, Amanda Gorman. I mean, she was just awesome, just in every way. So those are things that'll stick with me.
And she's another Californian as well. So, Scott, we've been hearing a lot this week about the fact that Biden issued these 17 executive orders right away, and most of them were rolling back President Trump's policies. How are those orders affecting California?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the executive orders just in general reflect California's values more than the ones that are being rolled back. But first of all, just on the epidemic, the pandemic, you know, to have a national strategy instead of having the federal government basically just dump vaccines on the states and say good luck, we have what appears to be, you know, a really thought through strategy. So all those executive orders are going to, you know, eventually, not immediately, but eventually have an impact. Obviously, what he did on immigration, we have 3 to 4 million undocumented immigrants in California, many of whom have worried about deportation. A lot of them live in mixed status families. A lot of that fear will be alleviated by these orders. And obviously, DACA students are going to have a particular benefit from that. And then I think also the clean air standards, which, you know, maybe we'll talk more about the environmental policy later, but, you know, that. And then LGBT rights being expanded among federal employers. Again, just a huge change in tone that affects a lot of people who live in California.
Yeah, I do want to come back to that question about environmental change and the policies. But first, let's talk about California's representation in the federal government. Beyond Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein, of course. But now, with the Biden administration, many Californians have been tapped to go to Washington. Carla, can you talk through who some of those people are?
I mean, this is a powerhouse California presence now we're going to see in Washington. I mean, this is really cannot be underestimated because Kamala Harris, the first woman of color, is not just window dressing in the Biden administration. That's very clear. She's with him in the office, a partner in all of the initiatives that we're going to see. That's going to be very important for you. But I think, when you look at the Biden cabinet, the most important people who are going to be driving policy, so many of them are Californians. Janet Yellen, UC Berkeley, at the Fed on monetary policy. Jennifer Granholm of UC Berkeley, heading the energy department, when you're talking about initiatives on auto emissions, on alternative energies, on carbon emissions, all of that Granholm is going to help drive. Alejandro Mayorkas at Homeland Security, talking about border security, but in a way that now I think instead of the wall, as Trump's wall, we're going to be talking about technology and border security and homeland security in a way that we haven't seen before. Of course, the new Senator, Alex Padilla, who has said that COVID is his main initiative. He's going to be working on that. And Javier Becerra at Health and Human Services. Remember that California showed the way when Obamacare was under attack with the Trump administration. The healthcare issue is going to be his main initiative. And I think on all of those fronts, California is going to have an influence that we haven't seen in generations in the White House.
Scott, California has been a leader in climate change. Are there any specific policies or programs that were launched here that we may see roll out nationally?
I think so. And, in addition to the names that Carla mentioned, Mary Nichols, who is now with the California Air Resources Board, was thought to be in line to be the EPA director. That didn't happen. But, California has led the way on climate change. I think you could see, for example, something along the lines of what we've done here, which is to require utilities to purchase electricity from renewable sources. There is no standard now nationally. And also the deal that California struck with automakers. Ford, Honda, and others to reduce emissions going forward, something the Trump administration, of course, fought in court. So I think those are just two things. And I think just in general, you're going to see the Biden administration embrace the green economy as a way to generate jobs, good jobs, high-paying jobs. When you cancel the pipeline, the XL pipeline, you have to, find other ways to employ folks who are in those kinds of industries. And I do think that we've shown in California that can happen in the green energy sector.
I'm curious to talk a little bit about the impeachment, especially in terms of this bipartisan sort of call for unity that we're hearing from President Biden, which may or may not come to fruition in the actual legislation, the actual work. And one piece of that in terms of the impeachment is something you wrote about today, Carla, in Politico, California Playbook. You wrote about a double flip-flop for House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who comes from Bakersfield. What's going on there?
McCarthy has twisted himself into a political pretzel on this whole issue of President Trump. Of course, he was known as My Kevin by Trump. He was a Trump loyalist. Right after the election, he urged Republicans to fight on, basically not to accept the results of the election, and even up until the day in which the Electoral College was being qualified, he voted against that. And yet, as the Capitol was under attack, under armed attack, McCarthy at that point said, well, President Trump has a role in that. He should have said something. He should have called off these people. And just this week, he flipped himself again and basically said, no, the president had no role in it. This has caused, I think, a lot of concern among Republicans. Even his political mentor, Bill Thomas, in the Bakersfield area, called Kevin McCarthy a hypocrite. And it does bode, I think, not well for McCarthy. This is a guy who wants to be the next Speaker of the House, who's hoping at the next midterm election, he's going to be able to take back a lot of those seats from the Democrats and get that job. At this point, some of those actions that he's taken in the last month, I think, cast doubt on that.
Scott, the insurrection at the Capitol seems to have had an impact here in California as well. The California State Senate has a new leader for its Republican Party. Tell us about State Senator Scott Wilk and why he's been chosen to take over.
Yeah, well, he takes over for Shannon Grove, who had been one of the more, I would say, conservative Republicans in Sacramento. She comes from Bakersfield. After the insurrection, she tweeted that Antifa was responsible for that. She took that tweet down. Scott Wilk is a moderate Republican. He comes from the exurbs of Los Angeles. He barely won his district, becoming increasingly purple. He's the most analysis shows of all the legislators in Sacramento among Republicans. He's the most likely to cross over and work with Democrats. So this is clearly a very different style of leadership. I think the state party chair, Jessica Patterson, is looking for a rebranding of the party, and somebody like Scott Wilk, I think, will perhaps help do that.
All right, Scott Shafer with KQED, Carla Marinucci with Politico. Thank you both for your time.
You're welcome.
Hometown pride beamed from the Bay Area at the inauguration of former California Senator Kamala Harris. COVID kept the crowds from gathering, but there seemed to be no limit to Kamala Harris-themed food and drink to celebrate the event at home. Reporter Monica Lam sampled several East Bay offerings.
A woman and a Californian is now in the White House. That's Vice President Kamala Harris.
That I will support
and to celebrate a native daughter's success, businesses around the Bay Area have been crafting special culinary treats in her honor. I went to check out some of these concoctions. My first stop, an Indian grocery store in Berkeley that stocks the Kamala Blossom ice cream.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I'm looking for this new ice cream that's named after our Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yeah, it's by Kulfi Creamery. The Kamala Blossoms, I should be having it over here. Oh no, I guess I ran out. It's flying from the shelf the last 2 days.
Do you think it's because of the inauguration?
That's one of the really good reasons. And of course the flavor is really good too. So.
Well, thank you. I'll have to look somewhere else for my ice cream.
Sure, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, on to a main course. The home of Chicken and Waffles in Oakland is serving up the Kamala lasagna, featuring collard greens.
Thought it was a little weird at first, but once we put it together and tried it, it was actually pretty good. Comes with a salad, a dessert of your choice, as well as a drink of your choice. David, 2 Kamalas. There you go.
And how's it been selling?
Oh, it's been wonderful. It's been selling all morning. Almost every order has had lasagna with it, so everybody's excited for it, and it's a great day because she's in there now.
Restaurant founder Derek Johnson has been friends with Harris for a long time. He wasn't here when I stopped by because he was in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration.
So this is something to celebrate for all women, not just women of color, but for all women, period.
For dessert, I looked for another ice cream option. Smitten Ice Cream in Oakland says their Kamala-inspired flavor has been selling out as fast as they can churn it.
We have something very special today. We have our MVP flavor, which is in honor of our first female vice president, our first Madam Vice President, if you will. The flavor is a malted, salted vanilla base with pecan pralines. People are really excited to celebrate Kamala and celebrate the first female vice president.
Hey, how are you? Good. I want to try the new flavor, the MVP flavor.
Just one scoop for you?
Yes. This is the best vice presidential ice cream I've ever had.
And if you're into cocktails, check out what the Fireside Lounge in Alameda is shaking up.
I created a cocktail called Kamala the Fierce. And so I've used ingredients from her mixed race background. So we've got rum from Jamaica, and then I've made a chai spice syrup representing her Indian heritage. Give it a nice shake.
You can get these cocktails to go or pick up a drink kit and make them yourself at home. For KQED, I'm Monica Lam.
While the businesses we just visited were able to offer special treats, all of them have had to fight to adapt during this pandemic, as California's rules have included bans on indoor and outdoor dining. This week, more than 50 Northern California restaurants and wineries filed a lawsuit against Governor Gavin Newsom for restricting dining while allowing other businesses, such as indoor retail, to continue. It's similar to a challenge filed by the California Restaurant Association against Los Angeles County. Joining us now by Skype from Calistoga is Carl Dean, one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. Carl, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your establishment.
Sure. We are a hotel up in Calistoga. We're a 160-year-old landmark property, and we opened last year a small coffee shop cafe on the property for outside visitors to come in and see the property and experience it.
And what has the last year of the pandemic done to your business?
Oh, it's more than the pandemic. It's the pandemic and then the fires as well. But the open and close restrictions, all the changes constantly that are thrown at us. The tens of thousands of dollars that we're spending, training and putting these restrictions in place, and putting all the sanitation stations and everything that we're supposed to do, heaters, umbrellas, everything. It's been a really terrible roller coaster for us.
Why do you think there's a ban on outdoor dining?
We're actually trying to figure that out ourselves. They keep saying that they're basing this on science and data that they have, but they have never been able to show that science or data to us. And as we started to look at data and science that was coming out of other states, outdoor dining specifically was one of the lowest spreaders of COVID.
So what made you decide to file the lawsuit?
It was time, the roller coaster of, open and close all year long, seeing this latest restriction that was coming down in December. We decided late November, early December that we're going to pursue this, started looking at all the different cases throughout the state and some other cases around the country, gathered all facts together and put together what we feel is a pretty ironclad suit against this ban.
Can you tell me about your coalition and who's in it, and also how this effort has been received in your community?
Sure. So myself and Cynthia from Trevania, a pizzeria Trevania in St. Helena, started these phone calls back in November and started to talk about what can we do. We can't just sit by. As you look at the big box and you look at some of these union-controlled businesses that are allowed to operate without any restrictions, completely unsafe, we said, we don't have a voice in this. And so let's try to, be that voice. And let's call up a bunch of other businesses around here and see if they're on board. And we did not get a no. We got, it's about time. Thank you for spearheading this. The support has been overwhelming. We've gotten, ever since the story went live and the case went out on Tuesday, hundreds and hundreds of emails of support every single day. More and more restaurants and coalition people joining the coalition. Tell us what you need. We're here for you. We want to get, we want to be a part of it. So it's been pretty incredible.
Well, Governor Newsom has responded. I just want to read what a spokesperson put out in a statement here, saying, "We will vigorously defend against this lawsuit challenging public health orders implemented to save lives and prevent the regional medical system from collapsing so all residents can access life-saving treatment. We're confident the court will uphold the order, as have numerous courts that have recently considered similar challenges." What do you think about that response?
Yeah, it's absolutely not true. And I was actually pretty disheartened by that comment and by that response, because instead of, coming back to us and saying, look, we know you're hurting and we'd love to have a seat, you a seat at the table, have a voice. Let's figure out how you could operate safely and get open. Instead, they come back and they're going to try to hurt small businesses even more than we're already hurt right now by fighting us vigorously on this. Again, there is no proof. There is no data and science. And they said that courts are actually upholding this. Well, they haven't actually upholded this at this point. They've been appealing it, buying themselves time, but there actually the only rulings that have happened have been in our favor at this point throughout the state. But then they keep coming back and appealing it, and they keep holding time as much as possible on these appeals, but they're starting to come up soon.
What do you think about the recall effort to remove Governor Newsom from office? Do you agree with that, or do you think it's stronger than necessary?
As the coalition, we're not involved in the recall effort, and we don't really want to comment on that. That's not what this is about. This is strictly about outdoor dining in wine country, outdoor dining and wine tasting in wine country. That's all we're really focused on.
Okay. And just last week here on the show, the state epidemiologist, Dr. Erica Pan, reminded us that the virus could be passed along anywhere, even outside, though it's a lower risk. Does that risk concern you?
Any risk concerns me, but I think there are safety protocols and things that we've put in place as restaurants that keep the public safe. We were operating safely all summer long and up into the fall, really up until the wildfires devastated us again. And we did not have any big spread or any big spikes. And if you start to look at what's coming out now, the data is coming out that as we shut down, the spikes actually increased because it acted like a prohibition type thing where it gave people unsafe places to go. At least before, they were coming and gathering in our restaurants and sitting in small groups, 6 to 8 feet apart. Well, once we took that away from them, it kind of forced them into the number one spreader of COVID, which is into their houses, family and friend gathering.
Carl Dean with Sam's General Store, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
As the debate continues over lockdown restrictions, the pandemic continues to kill thousands around the world. In America, more than 400,000 people have now died from the virus. Here in California, the total death toll has surpassed 35,000. Joining me now is KQED health correspondent April Dembosky and KQED science reporter Leslie McClurg, who both join me via Skype from Oakland. Leslie, how's our hospital capacity looking in California right now?
The good news is that it appears to be cresting. We saw these massive spikes from Christmas and from Thanksgiving, and it looks like may miss the New Year's crush that so many feared. I would say the situation is still quite dire. Our ICUs are still full. That's why we are still all on lockdown across most of the state. But the situation does appear to be getting better. Hospitalizations have dropped by about 10% over the last 2 weeks. So maybe the spread is beginning to come under control.
So maybe a little bit of good news. April, how is vaccine distribution going in the state?
Slowly. We've distributed about 45% of the vaccine doses that we have. And so there's a lot of doses that are sitting on the shelf. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The logistics are really complicated, but officials are now starting to say that our plan for prioritization for who gets the vaccine first was a little too complicated. So the state has been under pressure to simplify things. And last week, the governor expanded eligibility of vaccination to people age 65 and over. And then there was a sudden sort of unexpected crush of, people trying to access the system, seniors flooding call centers and online registration portals trying to get an appointment. Some were left waiting up to 8 hours.
Well, Leslie, information flow has been another stumbling block. How are people learning about when and how they can access the vaccine?
I think you could ask any individual person and they would give you a different answer. And I think that's a result of the fact that we don't have a centralized system either created by the federal government or state governments. The best place to go generally is your county public health website, but not everybody knows that. And so it's a bit of a scattershot approach for most people, leaving a lot of people pretty frustrated. Tech workers, a group of volunteer tech workers, are trying to fill the void. They've created a site called Vaccinate CA. About 200 people are calling around to pharmacists and to doctors' offices, across the state every single day, trying to collate that crowdsourced information into one place so people can find out where to go, where do supplies exist, do they qualify, how to make an appointment. But I think it is a reflection of what we have seen time and time again in this pandemic is that private citizens, institutions are filling the void because public officials are just scrambling and I would say kind of chasing the pandemic, unfortunately.
Well, April, I'm curious how all this confusion is affecting the efforts towards equity in vaccine distribution that you've been doing reporting on.
The original plan was one that was weighted more toward socioeconomic factors rather than age. We had essential workers was at the top of the list for California. Now, by opening things up by age, at the moment, it's more of a first come, first served situation. So the people who have the time and means to figure out the system are going to be the first to get a vaccine. And that is, usually affluent, educated people rather than the vulnerable populations that we know have been hardest hit by the pandemic.
At this point, the essential workers are really being pushed back into the line and those 65 and up are being brought up faster.
Now that the state is shifting the plan and they want to vaccinate all seniors before essential workers, some people are upset about, though there are really good reasons for the shift. As Leslie said, the surge may be cresting, but it's mainly older people who need hospital care. And so you can relieve the stress on the healthcare system if we can vaccinate older people first so that they don't get sick and need that care. The flip side is
You know, it's 6.2, we have 6.2 million people in California who are 65 and older. And with the current rate of the vaccine supply that we're getting, we probably won't finish vaccinating older folks until May. Mm-hmm. And so that means, you know, these other essential workers who had been told that they were going to be prioritized are now pushed much further back in line.
Well, it does seem like we need more vaccine as well. Leslie, the Biden administration is planning to put more money and people power into fighting the pandemic. So how and when will we see that assistance make its way to California? And will there be more vaccine?
Good question. I think that we're all waiting for. I think the officials, you know, in all stages of government desperately want to know the answer to that question. And I think there is a lot of hope that the Biden administration will do this quicker and faster and bring the vaccines that are desperately needed to our state. You know, San Francisco this week came out and said, we are running out of vaccines. We could run out of vaccines as soon as Thursday. So the supplies are desperately needed. We have 40 million people in this state that need 2 shots. And so far, about 1.6 million shots have been administered. So we have a long way to go. And there are deep hopes for the Biden administration, but I don't think anyone knows whether or not that's going to go smoothly, to be determined.
Leslie, this week Amazon sent a letter to President Joe Biden offering their help with logistics and distribution, which they didn't offer to President Trump, an interesting side point. But how could Amazon's involvement help the situation?
Well, we've heard reports of vaccines sitting on shelves, expiring. There are vaccines that aren't getting out to the public, and we know that Amazon is really good at getting things from point A to point B. You know, if you order something, you get it the next day, and that's the kind of quickness that we really need right now. So it may be one of our best options to turn things over to a company who is really good at distribution in a moment where we just need things to move fast. So there's a lot of experts saying, yeah, let's do this. If the government can't do this, let's turn to the private sector to get it done, because we just need to stop the spread of COVID.
Leslie McClurg and April Dembosky, both with KQED. Thank you both so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Priya.
Over the past year, we've grown accustomed to all kinds of signs reminding us to stay 6 feet away from others. Bay Area photographer Scott Strazzante found art in these daily reminders, and we bring you his perspective in this week's look at something beautiful. I'm Priya David Clemens. You can reach me on Twitter at Priya D. Clemens, and you can find more of our news coverage at kqed.org/KQED Newsroom. From all of us here at KQED Newsroom, thank you for joining us. Good night.